All right. It's about 9 o'clock. Everybody starts moving to their seats. Well, Miss Katie, are you going to be joining us this morning? Are you going to participate in the discussion? Okay. All right. That's a big smile. All right. We are going to do a part 2 on what we were discussing last week. I think it's Louisiana that had passed a law that the Ten Commandments should be posted in classrooms. And I think it's in Louisiana that a judge put a halt to that, as we knew they would, because they always do. Now, the Ten Commandments are just a shorthand for the biblical worldview generally. A judge says that this is unconstitutional. How is that possible? That for 175 years, it never occurred to anybody that the Ten Commandments in the classroom would be against the Constitution. And now we just sort of assume that it is. Was there an amendment to the Constitution somewhere that I'm not aware of? How is it that judges are seeing things today in the Constitution, or it's not, this really isn't so much a constitutional issue, actually. It is a religious issue. It's not so much a change in the idea of the Constitution. It is that. But it is also a change in the idea of what religion is. For 175 years, it never occurred to anybody that the Ten Commandments was in any way hostile to the Constitution. Quite the contrary, that it was assumed that those two went together. And there was no conflict. And now we treat it like, ooh, they're going to put 10 Commandments up on that. That's a bold move. So what is going on? We started talking about this last week. We're going to talk more about it. There has been some profound changes in how certain aspects of our culture are viewing things. Viewing religion, viewing reality. And this is giving rise to this conflict that we're seeing. Last week we talked about a new alternative worldview that's afoot. It's important that we talk about the alternative so that we can get a better sense for what the biblical worldview actually is. So to take a look at what the alternative is, what is being offered, and it's sometimes easier to see, okay, why is the Ten Commandments a problem now? Well, it's a problem if this is your way of viewing reality, and this is the new way that people are, and judges are looking at things. Whoops. So last week, we began by talking about individual rights. And the comment that I made is that the biblical worldview is certainly not contrary to rights. In fact, really wanted to get down to it, it is the biblical worldview that gave rise to the idea of individual rights. Individual rights flow very naturally from a biblical worldview. But the idea of rights has really changed what those rights are and what freedom means and what it's supposed to, what it is that we're saying, that freedom is a good thing. The point that I made last week is not so much that slide as it is written there is necessarily a problem, but from a biblical worldview, we would not lead with that. We would not say the first order of business is my individual liberty and freedom. I want to talk briefly about the idea of liberty and rights and how in a biblical worldview they have traction and how in a current worldview they don't. consider, just as a proposition, it has never been the case in Western society, and probably anywhere in the world, that there was such a thing as a right or a freedom to do wrong. Okay? We don't have a freedom to do wrong. The freedoms that it was assumed that we were being protected in the, not just the Constitution, but just in our cultural understanding that we should be free, that the idea is that we should all be free to make choices among various good things. It doesn't mean, and nobody has ever thought, that anybody has a right to choose evil. And to talk about freedom and to talk about rights presumes a knowledge of right and wrong. But when you hear how things are discussed today, you find that that second part is often ignored completely. Let's talk for a moment about how the discussion of elective abortion is advanced in our society today. There is a pro-life side, and the other side is not pro-abortion. What is the other side? It's pro-choice. What is the argument for abortion? The argument is never that abortion is a positive good. There may be some who think that it is, but that's not the argument. The argument is it is a right. A woman should have the right to choose. That's the argument. Now, that is treating the right to choose, the freedom to choose, as what we might call a positive good. What do I mean by a positive good? I mean a thing that is good in and of itself. Okay? Life is a positive good. Food is necessary for life, so we can say food is a positive good. Money is not a positive good. It's an instrument that can be used to achieve positive goods, or could be used for other purposes, or not used at all. Money itself is a means to an end. The thing that is the end is not contemplated when you just have a pile of money. Okay? So just being rich is not good. Depending on what you want to do with the money, we might say being rich is good or not good. Freedom is like that. Freedom is not a positive good. In other words, all other things being equal, being free is better, to make a choice is better than not making a choice. And the answer is, I can't answer that. Free to do what? Should we be free to do evil? We should not. We should be free to do good to the extent that freedom is possible. But the issue of freedom by itself is meaningless. Just by itself to say, I am free and that is good. Free for what? Free to take your own life? Is that good? Are we better off if we have the freedom to take our own life? Is that freedom by itself good? And the answer, I think we'd say, is, well, it depends. If taking your own life is good, then yes, it could be used for good. But freedom by itself doesn't mean anything. It's a means or an instrumental good. To be free to do something is good if you intend to use the freedom to do good. Otherwise, we don't know whether freedom is good or bad. It just depends. Okay? So what I mean is, a positive good is a thing that's good in itself. Freedom is not that kind of a thing. Freedom is a potential, but what the freedom is used for determines whether we like the freedom or not. Okay? So freedom without the thing that we're talking about means nothing. So when we say a woman should have the right to choose, but we don't address the question about the morality of the choice, we are making an incoherent statement. Why is it better to have that freedom? It's only better if the freedom to choose this is good. Then that's good. Then we can say the freedom to choose a good thing is good. But the freedom to choose a bad thing is not good. And freedom divorced from just, I am free to do anything is not good. But the abortion debate does not proceed on the basis of whether the thing we're talking about is good or bad. It proceeds entirely on the basis of the right to choose. But the right to choose by itself doesn't mean anything. You have to look at the underlying thing that we're talking about choosing. Then we can decide whether we ought to have a right to choose that or not. The same can be said about sexual orientation. I should have the right. Well, whether you should have the right depends upon the thing, whether sexual orientation or to choose a homosexual lifestyle, is that a good thing? If we say it's a good thing, then that leads to one. If we say it's not a good thing, that leads to another. But we shouldn't defend it on the basis that you should have the freedom to do it. You're begging the question then. Should you have the freedom to do it depends upon whether it's a good thing. Or, not to pick on homosexuals, let's just say the right of two people to sleep with one another they want. They should have the right. So there again, it's another argument where everything proceeds on the basis of rights are good without respect for what it is that we're talking about. Rights are not good or bad. You have to look first at what we're talking about. Then we can make an assessment as to whether the right that we're talking about is a good thing or not. A right to do what? Same issue with trans. I mean, all these things across the board are all debated in quotation marks there, just on the basis of rights. We should have the right to do this. But the morality, the goodness or badness of the things that we're talking about is never touched. Why not? Because it's considered sufficient simply to say you should have the right. You see what I'm saying? This is how the debate goes. Now, this is how the debate goes. If you actually want to talk to somebody who is going to try to advance these arguments, they will go further. The debate doesn't go there. I mean, if you were going to argue that consent is the only thing that is necessary for sexual relations to be good, then there will be those who will argue that the right to do that is good because consent is all that you need for this to be a good thing, and they will argue that. But that's not how the debate goes forward. In our culture, if you just put out there that we should have the right to do that as a free country, that's sort of an argument. That's usually all the more argument we have. That rights are a good thing, as though they are a positive good by themselves. And they are not a positive good by themselves. There are lots of times when we would say, we should not have freedom. That is not a good freedom to have. Okay? If your only choice is a good one, there's one good choice, and every other choice you might make is bad, then you might argue that you really don't have freedom there, do you? And you don't want freedom there, because the freedom would then mean that you can choose bad. Now, there are all kinds of ways in which we are limited in what we can choose because all the other choices are bad. You've heard the thing, you can have any color car you like as long as it's white. Okay, well, does that mean that a white car is bad? No. It just means there's no other choice to make. But this is still a good one. Does it make it bad because I don't have an alternative? Well, they might think so. They might be frustrated. But I mean, it doesn't mean a white car is bad because I don't have the choice to pick another car. We have choices among good things. And we might say it's better to have a choice between a white and a black and a green car than just have a choice of a white car. We might make that argument. Okay? But there are some things that we just should not choose, period. So a car that blows up when somebody backs into it, that would be a bad choice. And you shouldn't have the choice to make that. Okay, so note that in our culture now, there's much discussion of rights without any discussion of the underlying good or bad of the thing we're talking about. And that really, if you want to think about it just a little bit, it is just an incoherent kind of a discussion. It's not a rational discussion at all, because rights by themselves are not a positive good. Okay? Again, the example. Should you have the right to kill yourself? And if you think that that is never going to be good, that you kill yourself, then you should not have a right to do that. You may have the power to do that, but to say that you have the right to do that is to say, that's good. It's good that you should be able to do that. And, no, you shouldn't.
You're not going to go to jail for it.
Well, unless you screw it up. Yeah. And of course, you're not going to go to jail for it if you are successful. But if somebody helps you, they might go to jail for it, and that's the issue. There's another issue there too, by the way, because on the one hand, it always seems kind of silly. Why would you make suicide illegal? Because, after all, how are you going to punish them? And the answer is, well, you're not. If they successfully pull it off, you're not going to punish them. But the law is a statement not only of what we're going to try to keep you from doing, but what we consider to be good or bad. So suicide is a choice that traditionally, in a biblical worldview, that is not a choice you're allowed to make. Now, you might make it. You may have the power to make it, but you don't have the right to make it, and it isn't good. Okay? So that as a society, we're going to have a law that, is kind of silly, but the law is a statement about what we think about this choice. All right, so rights have been shoved forward as though they are the be-all and end-all of our political discussion. And like I said, that is an incoherent and very incomplete discussion. The discussion has to be on the rightness or goodness or badness of the things that we're pondering. Once we get to that, then we can discuss, whether one should have a right to do it or not. Now, last week we also talked about this new worldview, and this really is kind of at the root of it. The rights sort of grow from this. More fundamental is this idea here, and that is, I write up here, religious beliefs based on revelation from God, and so on and so on. Here's what really is going on in our society. Christianity cannot be imposed upon other people, or its rules or its understanding of things cannot be imposed. It cannot be the structure of public order in our society, because we cannot know whether it's true or not. And therefore, it can't be privileged that way. Now, that's what's really going on. I made it a little more general up here. No organized religion. No religion based upon a revelation from God. But let's face it, in our culture, we're not worried about all the different, we're worried about one. There's one religion that we are concerned with imposing its ways upon the rest of us. That's Christianity. And we're not allowed to do that now. And why are we not? Why for 175 years did it not occur to anybody that that was a bad idea, that you couldn't do that, and now all of a sudden we realize so clearly you can't? Well, because there has been a shift in the modern mindset from believing that God has spoken to now being uncertain.
I think it's stronger than that. I think Christianity is the enemy of society these days.
Well, practically speaking, yes. These two worldviews that we're looking at are diametrically opposed. And a worldview that says we simply can't know whether there's a God or not, and even if there is a God, we can't know whether that God has spoken or not, is diametrically opposed to the religion that says the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Christianity is fundamentally rooted in the idea that not only that God exists, but that He has spoken definitively. So you can't get more opposite than that. Now, so if we have decided that you simply cannot know, how did they come to that conclusion? How is it that 200 years ago people thought you could know, and now all of a sudden intelligent people say you can't know? What happened? Consider. We have a symphony assembled. And I ask you, can you tell me what song they're playing? And you say, well, probably, if I recognize it. Can you tell whether this is Beethoven's Fifth or whether it is a Boston Pops version of a Beatles tune? Can you tell?
Yes.
You say, oh, yeah. I'm going to change the rules a bit. All you have is a photograph. Can you tell?
Hence who's conducting.
You have a photograph of one violinist, okay? Can you tell?
No.
Why not? You don't have enough information. And you might complain. How am I supposed to answer your question? Because I need more information. What information do you need? Sound. I need sound. And you're only giving me sight. All right, well, so that's kind of what's happened here in our modern thinking, is that once upon a time, we understood that there were ways of knowing things beyond just the five senses. But then somebody changed the rules, and they said, no. If you can't detect it from your five senses, if you can't measure it or weigh it, then we can't know that it's true. And we can't weigh and measure God, and there's no way we can know for sure, based upon our five senses, whether Jesus came from God or not, or whether any of this is true. And what they've really done is they've said, well, we'll let you evaluate this, but we won't let you use all your information. We'll only let you use the information that you get from your eyes and your ears and your mouth and your nose and your skin. And if it doesn't come from that, if you don't have personal knowledge and can't measure it, then we're simply going to say, you don't have access to any more information than that. Now, can you tell me, did Jesus come from God or not? And you're going to have to shrug your shoulders and say, how will I know if that's the only information I have?
Can we disallow Hubble's law for the same reason?
We can disallow a lot of things. Now, so what's happened is the rules were changed. Who says that my five senses are the only way to detect what's going on out there? What else do human beings have to detect what's going on out there?
Tradition, history.
Well, but even more fundamental than that. How about your brain? How about the human mind? Does the human mind perceive things? I think mine does. My hands feel things. My eyes see things. My ears hear things. My brain sees and hears and understands and evaluates. My brain perceives things that my eyes alone may not see. My brain perceives things that my ears alone cannot hear. So my mind is an organ that detects things that my senses alone can't detect. We see order and meaning all over the place, don't we?
It's an abstraction machine.
But our minds find the meaning in what otherwise, if just left to our senses, would be chaos. Do you know how difficult it is to teach a computer to recognize, say, a cat?
No.
Click on all the squares that have traffic lights.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, we're learning to do it, but the way it's being done is not the way the human mind works. It's just that computers overwhelm the data with speed. I mean, in a sense, we're going to give you a picture of a cat, and then you're going to sort through pictures, zillions of pictures, and when you find the one that looks closest to this and it says cat, you'll say cat, okay? But that's not how the human mind works. The human mind just sees a cat, doesn't go through zillions and zillions of pictures. It recognizes something about this as this is a cat. It imposes order, but the computer has a lot of trouble with this. And the way we go about this is kind of like playing chess, too. Computers are very good at playing chess, but not because they think. They just overwhelm the opponent. They overwhelm the human mind just with the sheer amount of computing you can do. I mean, if I can tell you every conceivable thing that could happen in the next 5 moves, probably going to win. Even then, the human mind does an amazing job, and until recently, computers couldn't beat the human mind. But it's just a matter of speed. It's not a matter, there's something about a human mind that perceives things, and it's not just a matter of an enormous database. Our minds perceive and see. So, for a Christian, we say, well, yes, if you limit me to my 5 senses only, I guess you're right. I don't know whether Jesus came from God or not. I don't know whether God created any. I don't know whether there's any meaning or purpose or whether anything is right or wrong. I don't know. But that's an artificial restriction. That's like saying, what is the music? Oh, you can't tell what the music is? Well, that means there is no music. Okay? No, it doesn't mean that. It means you've so framed the issue that I can't tell. So that is what has happened in modern Western thinking, is that we have reduced the things that we will allow, and then what that does is that eliminates the possibility of coming to some truths. There are truths that are just beyond us, pretty much by definition. We can't see it, we'll never see it. It's not possible to see because you can't perceive it with your 5 senses. And that's what's changed. And that's why you get something like this, where they say, well, we can't impose Christianity's view of the world on society because, not because it's wrong, but because we just don't know. We couldn't possibly know. It would be arbitrary. If we let you impose your view, then we're arbitrarily lifting you up. And you have no right to claim to be true. Now, the irony is they will lift something else up, and they will say that can be imposed, and they'll say that we can know is true. Which brings us to our next slide. Naturalism is kind of what you get when you say, I'm just going to limit myself to the 5 senses, and I'm going to make certain other assumptions too. Assumptions about cause and effect, and how from the beginning of the universe everything has worked according to cause and effect and according to natural laws and so forth. And we're just going to, so think of naturalism as, rather than going through all the details of what naturalism means, from the point of view of Christianity, here's what it means. It is anti-supernaturalism. Okay? Christianity believes that there is a supernatural. That is, it believes that God is capable and does do things and is not limited by the properties of physical things. He not only is capable of doing this, but does this routinely. We say other things also. We talk about a human soul. We do not consider a human soul as just a natural emanation of the workings of the brain. But the Christian understanding of the human soul is that there is something about that that is supernatural. There is something about human life which is supernatural. It is not, we are not just like a computer, but really, really fast. Now, in the world of naturalism, they have a very difficult time and generally will deny the existence of what you and I would call the soul. They will say it is an illusion. It seems like you have a soul, but you don't. Sort of like a computer seems like it knows how to play chess and recognize a cat, but it really doesn't. And that's what they would say. It goes further. They would deny that you have a free will. And if you think about it, actually, that makes perfect sense. If naturalism is true, if everything happens according to physical properties and cause and effect, well, then that means that you are also a product of cause and effect, and that means that you do not have free will. You are as bounded and constrained in the things that you do as an apple falling from a tree. It doesn't have any choice. That's what natural law will say will happen. And so your mind works the way it does, and you do the things you do because, well, you have to. It may seem like you're making a choice, but you're not. So it's really kind of funny. Naturalism completely wipes out two things that we hold near and dear to ourselves: free will and my soul. Should it surprise us then that it is also agnostic about God? I mean, if it can't even figure out whether I am a real person who has a soul and a free will, how do we expect that they are going to plumb the depths of the universe and figure out that there's a God out there? They deny, and do you know why they deny everything? The nature of naturalism is the only truth that we're going to admit into the discussion is what we can gain by our five senses, and then we'll operate on that only. Well, yeah, if you do that, you're not going to hear the music. You will not hear the music. It's there. It's just loud as can be, but you can't hear it because you have defined it out of discussion. Now, that's why our society is where it's at right now. That's why we post the Ten Commandments, something that used to seem, well, it seemed completely reasonable to me. And now we say, oh, no, you can't know whether that's true or not. So we can't impose that. Okay? This is a new worldview, which is very and deeply hostile to religion. Do you remember that we talked some time ago, and I was experimenting with slides and experimenting with bubbles and things like that, and I learned how to do that, and that was fun. And I put a bubble on this side and a bubble on that side, and one bubble was theism and the other bubble was atheism. Remember that? And remember what was right in the middle? I put right in the middle, the bubble right in the middle was agnosticism. And I put it right in the middle because that's where people think it goes. Here, I believe in God. Here, I believe there is no God. In the middle, I don't know. But remember what we said about that? Where does the agnostic bubble belong? In the middle? Agnosticism is a kind of unbelief. It is a kind of atheism. It belongs with atheism. Okay? But in our culture, we treat it like it's in the middle. It's even-handed. If I'm an agnostic, that means I give the devil his due, but I give God his due also. What you really do is you give the devil his due and God is dismissed. By the nature of what God is, the devil's perfectly fine with you doubting his existence. He doesn't care. That's good for him. But God, on the other hand, I mean, there's either an allegiance to God or there's no God at all. It's either on or off there. So in our society, this is peddled, this idea that rights are a good thing all by themselves. That is incoherent. And that agnosticism is being balanced and fair between different views about what we really cannot know. But agnosticism is really an embrace that we cannot know. You see? I will agree that atheism actually goes further than naturalism will permit. Because naturalism says you are confined to your five senses and you can only conclude what your five senses will tell you. And by the way, when I say the five senses, I will include five senses as expanded by machinery or fancy cameras or sensitive devices and so forth like that. We're still talking about the same thing. But based upon five senses, you cannot conclude that there is no God. You just don't know. Agnosticism is the default when you say, I won't allow you enough information to make a real good choice. Okay? Then I don't know. Is there music? I don't know. What music is it? Well, I know even less of that. Same thing. Is there a God? I don't know. Well, what does God think about? Well, I don't know. I know even less about that. That didn't used to be the way human beings thought. That was not the way in our nation. We thought for 175 years, nobody thought that. And now all of a sudden we are. So we cannot make statements like, ultimately God is judge of each and every one of us. A human being is an eternal creature created by God and under the judgment of God. Will be judged by God for better or for worse. We cannot say that God has created human beings and that government is instituted to preserve inalienable rights that God has given us. We can't say that because we just don't know. Can't hear that music. Now, we haven't, as a nation, pushed this that far yet. I mean, there are individuals who have. But as a nation, we're still clinging on to this idea that, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. That this is flies so absolutely in the face of sort of the agnosticism of our culture today. But we'll still hold on to that. But that will give way. At some point we'll give way and we'll say, well, there's no such thing as an alienable right. And there are many who would say that now. There's no such thing. What do you think?
People seem to be more comfortable saying, I don't know, than saying, well, I'm Christian, because if you say I'm Christian, then you have to answer questions
Well, sure.
about what it means.
Yeah.
to be
Look,
Christian.
in one sense, I don't know is a sort of
A blanket.
oftentimes is a cowardly way of just, you don't have to stand for anything. You just say, I don't know. Now, so yeah, a lot of it is that. I mean sometimes I don't know is, there's a difference, folks, between I don't know, but there's an answer out there, and I don't know, and nobody does, and nobody can know. Those are two different things. I don't know is perfectly okay. I don't know and it can't be known. Well, then that's going to create a problem. Now, let's talk about this next. The essence of a human being is one's own inner self-conception. Now, this is up here because this also is current in our cultural thinking, that a human being is what you are inwardly. Now, let me tell you a couple of things about this. This view does not flow naturally and does not really belong with naturalism at all. It's a totally different stream of thought that are now being wedded together in our culture. This view really kind of does envision that a human being has a soul. They wouldn't call it that, maybe. Maybe they would. They're not being theological, though. They're just phenomenological, I guess, what they would be. This is what it feels like. They wouldn't root it in God, but they would just say, look, I have a soul, or I am who I am inwardly. But this does not flow from this agnostic idea. This flows from a totally separate concept, a totally separate stream. Here, in this view, human beings do have some kind of an immaterial, supernatural, if we could call it that, existence, and free will. Totally contradicted by the idea that you don't have free will because you're just a machine. You're a very fancy biological machine, having evolved through the ages by adapting to your physical universe. You're a physical thing that's adapted to it according to physical properties. So you are not supernatural at all. You are entirely natural. It just seems like you're supernatural. And then you have this other stream that says, no, there's something special about a human being. That I am alive. That I do have this immaterial existence that transcends the stuff of this world. And that's the real me. Now, what's interesting here is, although these two views do not go together, naturalism and this kind of individualistic, I am who I am deep inside idea, I don't know what you would call it. I have to come up with a name for it. I have to figure out what the name for this is. Yeah, maybe essentialism. These two do not, they don't go together. They have two separate sources. Both of them are entirely contradictory to the biblical understanding of a human being. In a biblical understanding of a human being, we have no problem as Christians saying there's such a thing as a supernatural, and we have no problem saying that a living human being is an example of what we mean by a supernatural thing. We also quite agree that human beings do not have free, unbounded free will. That I just make choices unconstrained by anything around me. That's kind of ridiculous. But we do say you do have free will. Now understand how important this is. Free will is a prerequisite for being a moral agent. What do I mean by that? I mean that God expects things out of you and will judge you if you don't do them. Free will is required for that. If God is going to judge you for doing evil, well, then you have to have had some kind of freedom to make the choices that you did. So free will in human beings is assumed in Christianity. And before you get lost in the whole idea of, you can't choose Christ, we're not talking about choosing Christ. We're talking about, do you have free will whether to rob the bank or not? Okay? Do you have free will whether to work hard and get ahead or not? Do you have free will whether to get up in the morning or not? You have free will in these things.
No, it's all the way God made me.
Well, so the thing is, both these concepts that we've been talking about here in this new worldview, that I am who I am deep inside, that flat contradicts what God says. God does not deny that there is an inner self. But the inner self can't be divorced from my body, because God has made me as a body and a soul. And I can't say the real me is what I think inside, and the body is a mistake. I can't do that. My body is as much me as my soul. If I think that I'm a woman, please try not to focus on that image too much. But if I think that, okay, we can all agree something's wrong. Okay? There's a mismatch here. Christianity is comfortable in saying, I have an eternal soul, and it is a supernatural thing. It is not the product of evolution and the product of natural forces. It is the special creation of God. And my soul will outlast my body by the miraculous power of God, because it is possible for me to exist like that. And God will allow that to happen. And I will be judged because I have free will, another supernatural thing. Free will is not natural. In natural things, everything is cause and effect. We may not be able to predict what the answer is going to be, but the answer is going to be something, and the thing that does it didn't choose it. But for Christians, yes, that is sort of the foundation, that God is judge and that we are accountable to him. It is the foundation for the whole idea that we are accountable to one another. We do not arrest and put people in prison only to protect the rest of society. We may do that to protect the rest of society, but we also do that.
She is a distraction.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. And you're going to be judged. But we also put people in jail because why? They deserve it. Right? There's an aspect of punishment that simply is, you deserve it. Well, deserve it, what does that mean?
Wait a minute. Didn't you ask the public defender?
What do you mean? Well, they deserved it. Okay, so when we say you deserve it, we are saying you had agency, you had moral agency, you could have made a different choice, you didn't make a different choice, and now you must pay the consequences for it. That is a deeply Christian idea. Human beings are not just animals to be trained or to be caged if they're dangerous because they're broken in some way. You will have that. People that are so broken that they can't be. But the basic idea from raising kids and how we just normally live amongst ourselves, and even how we treat your basic garden variety bad behavior, is that you should be ashamed of yourself. You didn't have to do that. And if you say the devil made me do it, or my upbringing made me do it, or my boss made me do it, or whatever, it doesn't work. We might say, well, those were all streams that influenced you. That's fine. But in the end, you made your choice. And God said this, and you did that. This is a deeply Christian idea that is contradicted when we say, I am whatever I say I am. I am what God says I am.
Who are we to judge?
Who are we to judge? Which makes sense if in a biblical worldview, it makes sense if what you're saying is God is the ultimate judge, and then I am judging based upon what God's standards are. But if there is no God, then who am I to judge? So you have this idea in society now that human beings are what they say they are, what they feel they are. There's a wonderful, I really enjoy it, Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat. And it's, Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it's a fun show. Eva loves it. And it tells all about the trials and tribulations of Joseph in Egypt, and all different kinds of styles of music are brought into this in a very humorous way, in a very lighthearted way. But there are one of the chief songs in this is Any Dream Will Do. And it's a nice little song, but if you listen to the words, you're thinking, really? I mean, would I really say that is the message of Joseph? He had dreams. But this converts the whole thing from dreams given by God, because God has a plan, to it is important that we all have dreams and that we pursue our dreams, which is not Genesis, okay? This is not Genesis at all. And the whole thing is set with a school play, and so the person who's telling the story is sometimes singing to the children. And there's a line in it where she's looking at a little child, and the little child's looking up dreamily, and it's a little very cute scene, and she's singing that you are what you dream. It's a very modern thought. From a Christian point of view, there is what we're supposed to be, and then there is what we are, okay? And we recognize that there's a difference between what we're supposed to be and what we are. Now, what we're supposed to be is not how I feel and what I actually do. That standard is set by God who created me, okay? So my job is not to be what I am, but to be what I'm supposed to be, which requires that I not be what I am. So consider this. In our society today, with the emphasis on me being me, the emphasis on self-expression. There's a commercial. I hate this commercial. It's not even the point of the commercial. I'm just watching the commercial. I just hate it. As soon as I saw this is this girl. And I don't even know what the commercial is for, which tells you something about the commercial. But anyway, she's walking along. She's got her headsets on, and she's walking in a crowd of people. She's just singing away. And I hate it. It's a commercial. But that behavior is so obnoxious. There are people that do that. Okay, I'm somebody who whistles all the time, and people say, did you know I should be... in the past, many people have said whistling. I think it was George Washington had some bad things to say about people who whistle. It's not that whistling was a problem. He just thought it was rude when you were whistling around other people. And if he's right, I should be ashamed of myself. Anyway, this woman was a young girl, and she's just all in her music and just singing away, because she's like the center of the universe. And what I'm hearing in my head is all that matters. And everybody else can join with me in hearing it used to be boom boxes. Nobody has boom boxes anymore. But it's the same thing. You crank the thing up and everybody gets to listen to you. Now, that is that makes sense, you see, in this new world where what's deep inside of me, see, music plays to what's deep inside of me. And then, so when some song really reaches me, then it's good for me to sing it out loud and play it loudly so everybody else can see what resonates with me. Because the assumption is what resonates with me is beautiful. And then when I let you in to see what the beauty that is in me, then I can share the beauty which is within me with others. And you, being beautiful people too, can recognize and appreciate the beauty which is within me.
But I don't care about the beauty within you.
Well, if you don't care about the beauty within me, then you're denying my humanity. You're denying who I am.
But isn't she doing that to everyone else?
Well, no, because she is the only one that really appreciates the reality what's in her, and the rest of you are lost in your own little cages and in your own little world, and you don't realize this. So now look, obviously I would agree that this is incredible. There's another way to evaluate this, okay? You are not sharing the world, the beauty with it, and you're just being selfish. You think that you're the center of the universe, and you think whatever's in you. But that is a very Christian way of looking at the problem. From a Christian point of view, when I look in my heart, what do I see? A lot of stuff that I don't want you to see. Okay? Now, that's why I don't want to see in you either. We don't really want to see within one another like that. So that in Christian circles, things like modesty and humility, self-containment, were always valued. The assumption is that we're all works in progress. So I don't want to drag out the thing that I'm trying to overcome by the blood of Christ and the Word of God and the Holy Spirit and drag that out. I don't want to drag it out to begin with, and certainly I don't want to celebrate it. Now I will be accused of being a hypocrite then. I say, I'm not a hypocrite because I don't show you the ugliness which is within me. I'm not a hypocrite. I'm not denying that it exists. One might say I'm a hypocrite if I drag it all out and say, isn't that beautiful? That might be hypocrisy. Now, these two worldviews are going to talk past one another. From the Christian point of view, this hyper-individualistic view of a person being beautiful on the inside and we should express it wherever we go, to a Christian mindset that is obnoxious at the very least, totally wrong-headed and completely misunderstands what a human being is. A human being is not a beautiful thing that just needs to go around being beautiful. We are broken things, beautiful in what we should be, beautiful in what we will be, but not always very beautiful in what we are. Now the naturalist just says, well, you're an animal and you always have been, and so no, you're not beautiful, but it's not right or wrong or good or bad. You just are what you are. This is what nature coughed up, and so there you go. So these three different views, two of them are very, very hostile to Christianity and very, very current in our culture now. It should not be a surprise to us that Christians feel very much on their back heels because things that are just deeply Christian are having to be defended against charges of being bigoted and closed-minded and things like that, when really it's all rooted in a totally different understanding of reality and what a human being is. Okay? All right, I'm going to quit. I've been warned several times, so I'm going to take the advice. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we know what we are. We know what we are because you've told us. We know, O Lord, that there is a God in heaven who has created us all and that you've come down from heaven and have given us the definitive word of what that God has made and what he thinks of us. We also know, O Lord, that we are created in his image and are accountable to him. And we may not always understand how all of this works, but we know that it's true. So we pray, Lord, that you would speak to our minds and lead us by your Holy Spirit, that we would make good choices, that we would follow you, and that we would rejoice in your word and the world that you have made and not be deceived by the things that are presented before us, the things that claim to be wise, but these people don't know what they're talking about. Oh, Lord, help us as your people to follow your word. Amen.